I first got interested in the idea of going to Mars when I was 3 years old.
And liftoff. Liftoff.
She wants to be the first or one of the first to go to Mars.
She's a regular kid with a dream that she's willing to pursue.
Spaceflight is very risky business. You have to take it serious, or you will die.
If the option was to go to Mars and never come back, I would still want to go and be a part of the mission.
When Alyssa was younger, I remember Alyssa coming to me and asking me, had human beings ever been to Mars? And I explained to her that, we'd been to the moon, but not Mars, but it would be her generation to become the Mars generation and go to Mars.
This would be something really cool. Go into space and then land on other planets.
Little did I know that I would be raising a child that I'm supporting to leave this planet.
I do everything that every other normal kid does, except on the side, I'm training to become an astronaut and go to Mars.
Kids are always told, you can do whatever you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. Alyssa has heard that, but she has accepted that I'm going to have to work really, really hard to get to where I want to be.
She's the youngest to ever graduate from Advanced Space Academy, was the first person to complete all NASA's space camps in the world. Got her rocket license before getting her driver's permit.
Currently, I have my basic scuba diver certification, and I'm working on my advanced.
She's doing the International Baccalaureate, so she's doing college-level classes in 10th grade.
Multilingual education, so she's taking her classes in 4 languages, English, French, Spanish, Chinese.
She's got the right mental attitude. She's doing everything that she can physically here on Earth to prepare herself for that journey to Mars.
I don't think there's anything specifically that kind of makes it easier for me or makes it something that others can't do. It's just something that I've kind of really focused myself on what I want to accomplish.
By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth.
Going to Mars is absolutely essential for continuing of the human species as a whole.
It is very important that we keep exploring because it has already been said that a single planet species will become extinct. Just going to Mars is that first baby step in showing people that we can move on from planet Earth, which is kind of like our little cradle now.
We're destroying our own planet. If we don't continue to explore, we could end up not having a planet to live on.
So even though there are a lot of risk in going to Mars, I believe that the rewards are so much greater. Yeah, space is a dangerous place, and yeah, there's so much that I'm giving up for it, but at the end of the day, there's so much good that can come from this mission. The big plans for Mars is eventually terraforming it, change Mars to kind of become like another Earth, to have a second home for humans to live on.
That's checkmate. Oh yeah! There are companies that want to send one way and colonize Mars, and then there are people like NASA and ESA that are working together that want to have a return trip. So I still have to look at it as a father that I'll have my child for 20 more years, and then I may not ever see her again. And that's hard. But for what she's wanting to do, I have to support her. I have to let her go. It's bigger than the two of us.
We know that the next 20 years together is going to be important because we know for sure that those are 20 years that we can spend together. Obviously, it's not the best thing to be telling your daughter to go on a mission to Mars and leave the planet, but I still know that he supports me anyway.
Every time Alyssa talks about having to go to space and how she can't get married and how she can't have kids, it makes me sad because I'm saying, oh, she's gonna leave me one day. But then I remember, we might as well live now, and when the future comes, we'll be able to accept it because we didn't waste time.
It's cool.
There are a multitude of challenges to become an astronaut. You have to have the right mental attitude, you have the right health, you have to have the right skills. Last year, we put out a call for the next cadre of astronauts. We had thousands apply, and we're accepting less than 10.
The biggest challenge for Alyssa is just trying to get everything done that she wants to have for her unique resume.
Specifically for the Mars mission, I would say that they're even more precise about who they want for that mission. So thinking about all that motivates me to put in the hard work now that I know to build up kind of a good resume that helps me stand out from others when I do apply.
The opportunity to be one of the youngest people that's ever ventured into space, to be a trailblazer, a pioneer, I think this is everything she's always wanted to do.
Just recently was accepted to Possum Academy. She's the youngest person ever to be accepted to that program.
Basically everyone who's ever gone to this program either has a college degree, either has a master's, either has a PhD, or is working on any of those. So they're all a lot older than I am. What Possum Academy is, they are preparing people for spaceflight. I will actually be certified to go to space.
I think it's really significant that Alyssa is a girl who has this huge dream to make it to Mars. She is someone that girls can look up to and say, hey, look at what she did. Look at what this girl did who was the same as me once.
So it is important to inspire kids and also adults. You can't let anyone take your dreams away from you. No matter how crazy it might sound, follow that through and never give up on your dream.
The 2033 mission that they've always talked to us about, that's when the sun is going to have the least amount of radiation going. That's when Mars is going to be the closest that it's been in thousands of years. That's when they'll have the technology perfected. Yes, if she was a few years older, a few years younger, it may not be working out, but the way doors have opened for her, it is definitely destiny working its hand that this kid is meant to go to Mars.
And liftoff.
Hey everyone, I hope all of you enjoyed the short introduction of Alyssa. And this next episode of this podcast is really special as I got a chance to interview Alyssa Carson, who is the first person ever scheduled to set foot on Mars. She has been working towards achieving this goal for a very, very long time and still is actively working, training, and currently also she's studying to get her PhD, and she graciously took out 30 minutes of her very, very precious time to answer my questions, and she also took the time out to kind of tell me where she is in terms of this venture to step foot on Mars. I would sincerely like to thank all of you for supporting this channel and helping me bring it this far to the point where I was able to get Alyssa Carson on my show. And I have a humble request to all of the viewers of this show to please subscribe to the channel, as this will enable me to bring bigger and bigger guests on the show. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 30 minutes with us. Yeah, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I know you have a very busy schedule, but yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm just gonna start with a brief introduction of you, and then afterwards we'll just jump into the questions. So yeah, I have Alyssa Carson here, who is known for her lifelong goal of becoming the first person to go to Mars. And this is a dream she's pursued for a very long time. So since the age of 12, by the age of 12, she attended every NASA space camp globally. And at the age of 15, she became the youngest person to get accepted into the Advanced Possum Space Academy, where she trained in upper atmosphere research and astronautics. And her extensive preparation includes scuba certification, survival training, G-force simulations. At 18, she earned her private pilot's license, and later she joined the Solar Stratus project. So yeah, just to kind of begin with, what kind of personal and factors drove you to have this ambitious goal, and how did this early commitment shape your long-term development?
Yeah, I think that when I first got interested in space, I was originally
kind of interested in like the curiosity of space, right? There are so many questions or anything that I would learn about within space. It was like, well, no one's done that before, no one studies that, or we don't really understand it. And there was so much curiosity and like room for exploration. And so I think that that really drew my initial interest in. And then I would say that the more that I learned about the space industry, the more I was just interested in the benefits that came from the space industry. I think I learned so much more, how much science comes from it, how much technology comes from it, and how much of like a how much like benefits we get from the amount of travel and advancements and scientific work that goes into the space industry. And so I think that just made me really want to contribute to it in any way possible. And that was slowly figuring out, what I was good at or where my skills kind of played into that factor. But I think it was really figuring out, okay, where can my skills take this to actually contribute to the greater goals of the space industry?
And just like, what stage of training are you in? Like, when do you think you would actually be able to go to Mars? Like, that's a big question everybody has.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for my interest in, especially applying to become an astronaut, I think one thing that's always been kind of the huge factor is education wise, especially for the NASA selection processes. You have to hold at least a master's degree in order to apply to the selection process. And so I've been really, going through school mostly and kind of getting to that level to even be eligible for a application to the NASA's astronaut selection process. So, especially since I'm in a kind of a PhD program now, I am kind of working on the PhD equivalence. So, 2 years into a PhD would be kind of your qualification of a master's for the NASA selection process. So, more than likely for the next selection process, I would happily apply and shoot my shot just to see where that could lead. Obviously, never high hopes for a first application, but I'd be very excited to even just say that I was able to apply and even get a rejection from that. So I think that's really where a lot of my next steps are. And then especially just kind of in the PhD program that I'm in now. So I'm in my third year and really just working on that and focused on that area for right now. And research has become a big area of interest for me. And so just seeing, where that will go and what type of research I really see myself contributing to in the future. And I mean, as far as the missions to Mars go, I think that's really up in the air. It really just kind of depends on the space industry and where it goes and where the areas of interest are. Obviously, the big goals right now are getting back to the moon within the next few years. And then I think once we start seeing more missions going back to the moon, then we'll kind of get a better picture of maybe how close or how far we are from these human missions to Mars. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of challenges with doing a mission so far away from us, and just like the travel time to get to Mars. And so I think that that's where we'll really start to figure out, okay, what is the timeline for this? Because obviously there's lots of ambitions and lots of goals of getting there, but I think some of these missions returning to the moon will give us a better idea of how far away those trips may be.
Um, and so I'm training to become like a pilot myself. About to get my PPL soon, and you already have your private pilot's license. So as far as, I believe you have your instrument rating as well, and I'm not sure if you're going to train any further, but like, how have these experiences kind of shaped your like overall readiness to become an astronaut? Like your experience in aviation, obviously the astronaut training programs you've undergone, and also I believe the microgravity simulations and even some of the upper atmospheric studies. Uh, how have these contributed to your overall readiness to become an astronaut and venture out into space?
Yeah, I think that when I first got interested, and especially the idea of wanting to become an astronaut, I mean, there's no rule book, right? I mean, you can really study almost anything that you want to study. You can almost do anything that you want to do, and then eventually apply to the selection process. I mean, the actual like requirements are so bare minimum, and even chatting with different astronauts and how their application was. And some of them would mention, they asked me if I knew how to change a car tire. So you really could never know what types of skills could maybe help you or kind of be beneficial for your application process. And so I think that as I was growing up, I was always just interested in things that I thought skill wise would relate somewhat to something space related. And also a big part of all the different things I was interested in or trying to pursue was really just also trying to figure out what I was most interested in. Obviously, I knew I liked space. I kind of thought I would lean more towards the science side, but I really wasn't fully sure. And so I think a lot of these experiences really just leaned into me figuring out myself and, what I was really most passionate about doing and what elements of the space industry was I most interested in. So things like getting my pilot's license, it was definitely a lot of fun. And I learned so much about aviation, which I think is an important aspect of space travel and a good thing to have like a good understanding of. And, I think that when I started it, I knew it wouldn't be something that necessarily I want to pursue professionally. I knew I didn't want to grow up and become a pilot necessarily working in that realm. But I think that even, regardless of whether I, do any more flying or none at all. I think there's so many skills that you get from each thing that you kind of push yourself. I mean, even just getting the pilot's license, I mean, whether it was problem solving, multitasking, or, any and all, there's so many elements to all the different things that I've done that I think that have really just added to just unique skills kind of along the way. And I was very fortunate. I mean, a lot of the different campaigns and stuff that I worked on were mainly research campaigns. So just like the microgravity flight, and a lot of those were really cool because not only were they just cool experience to be able to go and do, but they were all for like scientific objectives. So they all had kind of like a greater science purpose, whether, the results from them were helping a spacesuit company or the results were going into a paper, whatever it could have been. A lot of them had like the greater science objectives. So I think those were really interesting because they kind of helped in my area of figuring out what elements I was interested in, but they also I knew were going towards science. And so those I think were a lot of fun, and I think really kind of sparked some of my curiosity in the whole research side of things because I was able to kind of work with people who were much older than me and much more versed in the scientific community and working in that manner. So I think that was really cool. But I think as a whole, it's just been helping a lot of figuring out where my area of interests lie. And yeah, slowly just building skills along the way. As I mentioned, I think that there's really no way to know exactly what skills are going to be the most important, but I always thought kind of being as well-rounded as I could be as good as I could do.
Okay. Um, and like, so a big part of what you're doing is like astrobiology. You've talked a lot about it in many other podcasts before, and your PhD, I believe, is sort of focused on astrobiology. Like, could you maybe just briefly talk about what it is, maybe what your PhD is focused on, and I believe you're working with Dr. Krell as well. So, um, what what is your PhD about, and also what is astrobiology, and how important do you think it'll be, especially for the Mars venture?
Yeah, I think that astrobiology as a whole has been building a lot more traction, especially within the last few years. We have much more science missions, a bit focused to it. And I was really fortunate to really learn about astrobiology when I was pretty young. I didn't really know too many of the options that there were, other than studying. If I wasn't going to be a pilot, then the only other things I really knew as options were either engineering or astrophysics. And I wasn't necessarily too into engineering either. And so I kind of just left me with astrophysics. I really thought that was the only other thing you could study that was space related, and I really wasn't aware of the amount of opportunity, especially within planetary science realm. But luckily, I met this lady who had worked in astrobiology, and she kind of explained it as more of like an interdisciplinary between the different sciences. So you learn more about all the sciences and how they combined, and it kind of gives you a bit more flexibility in the type of research that you want to do because usually people hear astrobiology
astrobiology, and their first idea is aliens, just because if you think space and biology, most people jump straight to aliens, which definitely can be one side of it. But, if you're more interested in physics, you can take astrobiology towards, looking for exoplanets or maybe Earth-like planets in other galaxies and seeing that aspect of it. Can we find areas with James Webb that maybe have similar oxygen content, planets that have a similar composition, size, that kind of thing. Obviously, you can lean very biological. Everything that I've done within astrobiology leans a little bit more into the biology field, but again, you can take that many ways in terms of, learning more about like plants. Can we grow plants on Mars? Can we grow plants in other soils and lean that direction? For me, I really wanted to mix more of like the microbiology aspect of space. And, I took a microbiology lab when I was an undergrad and really fell in love with microbiology and was always curious at figuring out a way to meld that with my interest in space. And I think that's really what I wanted to do for a PhD. So I got super lucky and kind of ending up in that field. So all my research is involved in astrobiology, but kind of a bit of a microbiology perspective. So I work with organisms and we essentially use them as a potential model or a test to see if they can withstand different Martian conditions. So whether that's, Martian pressure, Martian soils, Martian clays, and really just see how they interact. The big question, is did Mars used to have life? We've always been interested in the potential of life in our solar system. Mars has obviously always been a candidate, mainly just because, the big idea of possible water on Mars, obviously from our perspective on Earth, you need water. And so since we have hope of, water maybe used to be on Mars, maybe organisms used to be there as well. And so mainly looking at that possibility of that past life. And if life was there, what type of life could it have been? So I work a lot in that realm. Obviously, astrobiology isn't solely restrained to Mars, though. A lot of the different interests right now with astrobiology especially is some of the icy moons in our solar system. So the places that we think have like subsurface oceans, obviously we think that there's water there, of course. And so anytime there's water, the next kind of stepping stone really is potential life. And again, when we say life, we're definitely talking about microorganisms. So I guess it's kind of aliens, but not really the exciting ones that maybe people would think about. We're definitely more focused on like the bacterial and microscopic size potential of life, but it's still a really cool field to be in, just to not only put together a few pieces of the larger puzzle of the possibility of life elsewhere, but also just just the fun aspect of it, of thinking, if there was life somewhere else, what could it be, or how could it be working? And of course, obviously we compare this potential of life to the life that we know of, but it's also possible that it can be completely different than any sort of life that we have here. So there's always room for speculation and questions, which I think kind of leads down a very fun path of just science curiosity.
Okay. And like you as just as a like throughout your entire journey, you've had really cool experiences, and one thing which kind of really like just caught my eye was you participated in the documentary The Mars Generation, I believe, and this was also, I think, it was on Netflix. So what was just the experience like being on this documentary, and what sort of impact did it have on your own career path,
Red leader checking in.
I was directly told that we cannot land on Mars before we do a med check.
Okay, pressure's going down.
Get them out of here.
Pressure onboard the station.
We're dead.
All in a day's work.
When we look at the night sky, we say to ourselves, are there any planets out there that are possible homes for humanity?
Space camp opened the path for me to do things that I really want to do.
Kids today have that same drive, that same passion that I had watching the first American launch into space.
High fives all around.
We've gotten to the moon, but it's a stepping stone to the red planet.
It would be so amazing to see the Martian surface with my own eyes.
Having a man or woman walk on Mars is just the most badass thought in my mind. It's been over 50 years since we've done something significant like this.
We don't really go to space anymore. People are losing touch with their human spirit.
We have an entire generation who want to go to Mars, but all of that will fall on fallow soil if there isn't some big mission where they can apply this enthusiasm.
Some people think it's fine to just stay on Earth forever, and some people don't.
Let's go out there and make discoveries. Let's change the world.
Somebody from my generation will put their footprint in the Martian soil.
I can't think of a better thing to be defined by.
It's our duty to breathe fire into the imagination of these young people, because our true place is among the stars.
Yeah, I would say the March generation was super fun. I mean, especially when I was younger, space camp in Huntsville, Alabama definitely became like a second home for me. And so I was kind of there all the time. And they obviously wanted to do a documentary kind of explaining a lot of space history and a lot of, the potential of a mission to Mars. But, once they started locking in more on doing it at space camp, it became a really fun kind of project to be a part of. I think that although my interest has always been, wanting to contribute to the space industry, I think science communication definitely became very much a second passion of mine, and just kind of teaching kids, teaching adults, teaching anyone a little bit about space, just because I think that the general public kind of has some idea of what's going on in the space industry, or has some sort of general curiosity about it, but, they may not have a full picture of what all is actually going on. I think one of the coolest parts about the space industry is that I think that almost anyone can find something that interests you, whether it's human exploration or satellites or black holes or asteroids, or, there's kind of always some sort of niche that is being researched or looked into. And so being able to kind of share any of that information, honestly, and kind of push that information to more people, I think is so important, just because it gives them a better perspective of what all is out there, especially for the next generation of kids, just because I think that it's important for them to know the amount of possibilities and opportunities that there are in different career paths that they could pursue. I always love whenever I'm able to speak to a group of kids, I tell them, not only about becoming a scientist or an astronaut or an engineer, but also some of the more niche jobs that there are in the space industry, the people that study psychology and focus on, how does an astronaut go and live on the International Space Station away from their friends and family for, 4 months, or, a lot of those aspects of it we wouldn't necessarily tie into thinking about space, just because it's not your direct science or math connection. But I think kind of teaching those things are important, because they're equal opportunities that kids can grow up and pursue. So I've always loved being able to do that. So I think, yeah, really just kind of let in more, and really taught me a lot about science communication, and also just kind of wanted me, or encouraged me, to continue kind of my want of spreading that information to other people, because I really do think it's beneficial.
Okay. And yeah, like just have a few more questions. So now also, like another interesting, I would just say, experience you had was, so you were like one of the 5 global influencers chosen to be a part with, to collaborate with NATO in 2022. So yeah, just how do you go about just getting selected, and then could you just briefly talk about this experience? Like, what was it like working with NATO and being one of the 5 influencers for this project?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool. I've always been fascinated on, bringing things more to a global scale. I think that everything to do with space is very much a global experience. I think that anything space related really is something, or really projects that we can be proud of as humanity. I think that it's really cool to even think about some of the accomplishments that we're able to make. And I think that they generally are really working towards these benefits that can kind of come back and affect Earth as a whole. And so I think that, working with NATO was a really cool experience, especially just because everyone had very different experiences than me, or, they definitely weren't all space focused. And so being able to hear other people's stories and where their passions lie, I think has always been a big area of interest for me, just because, obviously I always share my messaging, which comes from a very space-centered background, but, other people's stories and seeing their passions, and especially where they stem from, are very fascinating. So I think that, the whole process was really cool, just kind of from the start and working with them and going through, I guess, a few little selections and getting down and yeah, just kind of being able to share some of that messaging, especially on a united front and bringing a little more awareness to space on a global scale, I think was equally as important. It was pretty recent that we kind of deemed space as like another domain in our areas of interest, between sea, air, and now thinking space, just because we now have so much technology and so much going on in the realm of space. So it's kind of cool for it to be equally as recognized as a lot of the other areas that we have in the world. So just very, very cool.
Okay. And like, so I just kind of got to know you a little bit more through the Swiss Space Tourism Organization, and so just like, how's it like? How'd you go about joining Swiss Space Tourism, and just how'd you get to know Boris and Klaus and everyone else? And this is also a major goal that they have to be able to jump upon the Virgin Galactic flights and then pursue a set of missions. So yeah, like just how'd you go about becoming a part of this organization and venture?
Yeah, I think with the Swiss space tourism, I mean, I got in contact with Boris just originally just through social media and chatting with him a lot about his areas of interest and his passions for space. I mean, I think that one of the biggest benefits, honestly, of being on social media has just been able to connect with people and globally, about other people's interests in space and where those are and what other people's passions around space are. So yeah, it honestly just started with a connection there, and obviously the main core idea of this project originally came from Boris, and yeah, just kind of hearing him out on a lot of his interests and wanting to do something bigger. I mean, I think that a lot of space tourism is really big building, and there's a lot of opportunity. I think one of the coolest parts about the space industry as a whole right now is the amount of opportunity that there are for other people and the amount of opportunity that there is to do, multiple things at one time. This really is the first time ever in the space industry where we're able to, continue working and sending people to the International Space Station. We're able to work on ideas of potentially sending people to the moon and sending people up into low Earth orbit. I mean, there's just so much opportunity that's kind of crazy. So I think it's really fascinating that we now have these opportunities of bringing space more to more people and having that available. And so yeah, I think it's just been exciting to kind of work with Boris and Klaus and kind of hear a lot of the things that they've been working on. And it's also just sharing our stories of how we've personally either been working towards our space objectives and where we cross in those interests and where they lie. So hopefully a lot of hope is there in some sort of mission happening in the future. And I think that we all just kind of cross our fingers and hope for the best. There's obviously so many factors that go into any sort of space mission. So obviously a lot can happen, but it's always fun to have those ideas and put a lot of work towards them.
Um, just a brief follow-up question. Like, most of most of the private space industry. I mean, we have NASA and we have many of these government organizations like EASA, NASA, and so forth. And we also have the private space industry as well. So, I mean, to me, it just feel like the private space industry is more focused on low Earth orbit projects, not that much of deep space exploration. NASA's more focused on deep space exploration. Like, do you think the private space industry will be able to also eventually focus on deep space exploration, or is this just something which an organization like NASA would have the capacity to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's honestly the big question. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm very fascinated to see where the like private space industry goes. I think, there's a lot of benefit in being able to be multifaceted and, being able to do low Earth orbit and deep space. There's also a question of, the science aspects of it. I mean, obviously NASA's involved in deep space, but they also have so many projects on just sending different missions. We have Dragonfly going to Titan. We had that recent asteroid mission. I mean, Europa Clipper that just launched not too long ago. I mean, there's so much science objectives also happening simultaneously. And so I think it's also going to be interesting to see where the private industry leans in that aspect. You know, do they shift to deep space? Do they shift to science objectives? Maybe, you know, that isn't as profitable for a private company. You know, there's a lot of interesting factors, I think, in where the private industry goes. I mean, I think that there's potential. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of work in, you know, companies like Blue Origin having different contracts for being a part of maybe different aspects of a mission to the moon, or, you know, maybe it's these private companies just become like the contractors on different parts of these missions. So maybe they're not soloing on these deep space flights, but they're heavily contributing to them in some way. So I think it is just going to be interesting to see where that goes. I mean, I think that there's always going to be an interest in low Earth orbit, just mainly with how much the International Space Station has been of a help. And I know Axiom is a big private company that's been, you know, really focused on keeping a lot of the aspects of like an International Space Station still, you know, running, just because being able to just do general science experiments in space or having people working in space on a regular basis has been really beneficial over the entirety of like the shuttle program and the lifespan of the International Space Station. So I think that's always going to have someone working in the low Earth orbit field. But it is going to be interesting how much that stays a focus, or if it does start leaning more deep space. Obviously, you have people like Elon Musk that says, you know, things like planning missions to Mars all the time. So it really is just kind of a curiosity right now in seeing how serious a lot of those ideas go and how possible it is. I mean, obviously, deep space is more complicated. I mean, there's a lot of factors just from the timelines. I mean, we think about the missions to the moon being so simple, but I mean, even going to the moon back in Apollo, it would take astronauts, you know, 3 to 4 days to reach the moon from a launch. So it definitely isn't the easiest of missions. So I'm probably one of the most curious people to kind of see where that goes.
Um, yeah, just final question just for you is like, on a broader level, like, what do you think are the motivations humanity has to reach someplace like Mars? And just, are we just aiming to expand human civilization beyond the Earth, or are we looking for signs of extraterrestrial life, or just kind of testing the limits of space technology, or is there just maybe some uh, intrinsic desire for exploration and discovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, to a degree, there's always a desire for exploration. I think that will kind of always be there in almost anything that happens space related. Just because there's always that level of curiosity. I think one of the biggest benefits of space exploration and specifically a Mars mission would be for the science objectives. You know, there's a lot that has been accomplished with obviously satellites and rovers and things like that, but you know, we still have never gotten any sort of soil sample, rock sample, anything from Mars, which is crazy to think about with the amount of knowledge that we have of the planet. But nothing has directly, you know, come back from Mars. I know that's been a big goal, and NASA has their sample return. That's kind of a big long-term project that they want to do. But really, there's so much that could be accomplished from a human mission to Mars. So I think that's a big advantage of that. And I think not only pushing the technology of space exploration, but I think the biggest benefit of what these space missions kind of give is kind of thinking outside the box. I mean, the amount of technology that has been invented through space endeavors is absolutely incredible. And I think it's mainly just because it kind of forces us to think outside of our typical norm. We're problem solving problems that we wouldn't necessarily have here on Earth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that technology is obsolete from being used here on Earth. And so I think that, you know, questions like, if we can grow food on Mars, if we can establish any sort of civilization on Mars, you know, obviously that's incredible, but the technology that goes into making those things possible also make more things possible here. And so I think those space missions just kind of give us an avenue of creativity, technological advancements, but all that does come back to Earth. Obviously, those ideas and technology can be used for other things. I always say, you know, if we can grow food on Mars, then I can guarantee we can probably grow food in areas on Earth that maybe maybe struggle a lot with agriculture, or, there's a lot of these things that can be translated to Earth problems. And so I think that the bigger picture of these missions really just kind of gives us the challenge and kind of helps us think outside those boxes while also pursuing those science endeavors. So I think that's a lot of the benefits of some of these missions, and kind of where space goes post maybe Mars moon missions, who knows. But I think that there's always been that element to space travel, that we're getting those science and technology advancements at the same time. And again, none of that is staying up there in space. All that knowledge kind of comes back here. And I think that's something really wonderful about the space industry.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for coming on my podcast. Yeah, you have you have a very busy schedule, but you took the time out to come and answer my questions. And yeah, I'll just spend a few days editing this, and I'll upload it on YouTube and Instagram as well. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and coming and talking to me.
Yeah, thank you so much.